welcome everyone. Hi, Steve. How are you?
I am beyond wonderful. Great to be here.
Excellent. And with us today, we have Reverend Michael Carter. How are you, Reverend Carter?
I'm okay. That's some nice music by Brother Mercer. So please tell them that. I like that.
Absolutely. He is the man behind the curtain sometimes and not here with us today, but he is a big supporter and help even when he's not here.
And he's my regular co-host on the High Strangeness Factor, but back in the old days, he couldn't always make it because he had a real job. And now he has a publishing company, which is still a real job.
Yes.
He can be on the show a lot more.
Yeah. That's nice music he picked out, composed.
Yeah. So do you want to tell everyone a little bit about yourself?
Yeah. Okay. I am an experiencer. I am a father. I am a clergy person. I live in this. Yes. Yeah. Yes. Practice makes perfect. It's not my first rodeo there either. And I'm a happy person. And I am privileged to be on the show today and have a new book it came out in December. It's a book of sermons. It's called Enlightenment. And have a couple new episodes of Ancient Aliens that'll be out or maybe already be out.
Oh, excellent.
And one is called The Chosen and the other is called The Teachers. And there's a new show coming out. It's coming on June 19th, but I'm still not supposed to talk about it, even though I had to sign a non-disclosure thing, but it's going to be on the Discovery Channel. And I think it's a different title, but it's called Alien Encounters, Fact or Fiction. And I just found out about it myself when it was going to air. It's June 19th, I think at 10 a.m. on the Travel Channel. On Discovery. So we'll see what that's about.
Is it connected with the ancient aliens people?
Not at all. Not at all. And like I said, I had to sign an NDA, but I was trying to find out. I knew June was coming, and I didn't get a response back yet from the producers. But then I saw it on social media, so I guess it's out there. But it should be wonderful. I flew out to Roswell to shoot it, which I had never been. So it was lovely. Class act from the producers to the people who fed us. It was just really wonderful.
Yep. And you originally got hooked up with Ancient Aliens through one of your books that you wrote, correct?
Yeah, I wrote a book called Alien Scriptures, Extraterrestrials in the Holy Bible. I was still working as a chaplain at one of the hospitals here, the big hospital here. And yeah, I was there, and I was working as a chaplain, and then I was part of their diversity program, and I moved from chaplaincy to full-time to their diversity initiative program. And I got a call. I was in my office, and I forget the producer's name. I'm sure he's not there anymore, but he said, "Is this Reverend Carter?" And I said, "Yeah." And they said, "This is so-and-so from Prometheus Productions in Hollywood, California, and I have your book here and wanted to know if you could come on the show." And I said, "Yeah." And so I've been doing that off and on since about 2014.
Oh, a decade.
Yeah. God,
wow.
Yeah.
That's a decade. Oh, that's scary. Thank
you.
I didn't
even
think so much for that, Susie.
Yeah. It was you're right. It was, ooh. My goodness.
May I interject something here? You were on a show with when they had William Shatner on with the round table. That was a blast. But Brandon and I compared notes. We thought we needed more Michael on that show.
First of all, thank you. And a lot of us participated, but it was cut out.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
You know how they edit, but because it was really about Giorgio, and we were kind of. But yeah, I wanted to see more too, because to me, the whole religious spiritual aspect of this is what puts the fire in my belly. I mean, I don't think technologically greater minds than I, back engineering, propulsion systems. I'm like, what? But my mind works like, how does this change your inner life? How does it change, the way you're going to walk through the world after you've had these experiences? So I wish we could have gotten more into that. But
Well, those guys have the gift of gab. They all do.
Yes.
Didn't William Shatner, maybe it was as Captain Kirk, but he had a quote that was something like, "What does God need with starships?" or something like
He
that.
did. Yes. Well, and what's interesting is, Susie and Steve, it's that, and I'm dating myself and maybe Steve, he reminds me a little bit of Charlton Heston, in the fact that Charlton Heston at that time during the Ten Commandments, he played Moses. He was an atheist. William Shatner does not believe in extraterrestrial life, but yet he plays wonderfully. This captain, I think he was a captain, but this officer on a ship, and in the future. And so, yeah, he said that after the conversation, it opened his mind up a little more, but he's not a believer in extraterrestrial life. He wasn't as of that show, and he was very vocal about it.
Before you had an experience, were you a believer?
No, these are great questions. I was, not that I expected not to be, but yeah, no, I was raised in the African American Baptist tradition, and that was my perspective, and and I'm not there anymore, and I don't knock it, but I love the church for what it could be. I love religions. For what they could be. Now we may kill each other over it and other things. But when I was a kid, I knew I wanted to be a priest. A priest, that was the word I used. I knew that. That's what I wanted to do. Now, I took a circuitous route, but I did not believe it. And guess the reason? Guess the reason? Because it's not in the Bible. That's the reason I gave. But that's what I knew. That's where I was. Now I know it's everywhere in the Bible and other faith traditions. But yeah, I'm saved, you're not. Jesus was the only way. And I still respect that. And Jesus is my brother. I haven't lost any reverence for that tradition. Not at all. My big thing with that was that I knew so many good people, like you guys. And I'm like, is a loving deity going to burn them in hell because they don't agree? That was my stickler. I didn't wear it on my sleeve. I never really bought into I'm saved and you're not, because I had people from all backgrounds. That was my life. But that's where, as I got older, I just had to pull away. The teachings of Jesus, always. And then, I have Buddha statues here and, comparative religion stuff. And there was a time when I identified as an atheist or an agnostic, but because I'm educated in the West, like you guys are. And that's the narrative. That's the big story. And I always had to come back to it in a different way, maybe seeing it differently, but I couldn't get rid of that. And I don't choose to get rid of that. And I incorporate other, the Buddha lived 500 years before Jesus. There's a lot of, Native American spirituality. I have a little Cherokee in me. You come together with, there's more than one way to become a better person. But in answer to your question, those were my roots. And Malcolm X said, you can't hate the roots without hating the tree. So I don't hate the tree, believe me.
Well, I grew up in a tradition where there wasn't the exclusion factor. If you didn't believe a certain way, boy, that was it. And I would think that so the creator of the universe has structured things such that people that are ignorant, that don't have this understand the way, are going to burn or be excluded somehow. It just never made any sense to me.
Yeah. And me too. And so, and I wrestled with it, and how could I keep one without the other? And you can. But that did it. And then then when I started having my contact experiences, that really pushed the boundaries. And even without that, I went to seminary. I went to Union Theological Seminary in New York City. It's one of the top seminaries in the country. And I loved it. My 3 years there, but their job was to make you uncomfortable. The unexamined life is not worth living, and the unexamined faith is not worth having. And rigorous intellectually, and those 3 years were life-changing for me. Of course, the extraterrestrial piece too, but even without that, because you had to wrestle. A lot of us don't think through what we believe, not just about religion, but anything. And so what I believe then, I'm a different person now. I'm a different, and sometimes we don't think that, do my beliefs that worked for me then, do they still work for me now? Do they still resonate with me now? And so I believe in, you ask yourself, you peel the onion. I'm 67, and I'm sure, and I'm not saying about core beliefs. I'm not just saying you're going to change everything, because part of seeking is finding something. But you have to, part of the examined life is, who am I now? Do these things still work for me? Do they not? How am I living my life? What do I want? Who am I? How does this work? And for me, it's a spiritual journey. Now, when I say spiritual, because people use, it's like love, we use it, it loses its meaning, at least in the circles I'm traveling in. But I mean, your interior life. How do you cultivate that? Whether it's meditation, prayer, being out in nature. How do you connect with whatever is greater than you? And then how do you walk through the world after that? That's what I mean when I say spiritual, the cultivation of your inner life. Where do I stand? There's some things that I will not change, that we need to love one another. That's not going to change. There's some things that were true 5,000 years ago that'll be true 5,000 years from now. That's what I mean, the evolution, because it's such a hackneyed term that when you use words like love and use words like, spiritual, they mean so many different things to different people. And sometimes they use so much, they lose their meaning, period.
Yep, for sure. I know one of the hangups for me was the actual Bible itself. I remember being in middle school and asking our pastor, like, why was the Old Testament God so mean? And my mom was like, you can't ask that, Susie.
Yeah, that's a no-no.
Yeah.
That's a no-no.
But I mean, if you actually read the Bible, those are almost, the God in the Old Testament and the God in the New Testament just seem like two different people to me.
I agree. I agree. I didn't know that then. Zachariah Sitchin, reading his books on the Earth Chronicles, and I met him. He was a neighbor when I was in New York City. That really opened my eyes to that. And if I'm coming from the perspective of paleo contact, that our ancient ancestors did have contact with off-world intelligences, and the Bible, it's right there in the Bible, and we're speaking specifically of Yahweh. And, if you look at Genesis, obviously, it's a retelling of the Mesopotamian Sumerian text, talking about Enki and Enlil. Yeah, Yahweh is a warrior God. He is a warrior entity from another place. And when you look at the New Testament teachings, you can argue. But see, I was raised to think that Yahweh was Jesus's father, but that couldn't be further from the truth now. But yeah, he's a warrior, and he's got anger management issues. And he was, if you look at Deuteronomy 32, depending on your translation, and that's the key to biblical reading, is that you got to get a good translation. If you look in Genesis 32, he's given the Middle East. Well, he's given that sliver of land. He's given that. So Yahweh's not the ultimate supreme deity. The idea of God is in the Old Testament, but there's really, in my mind, no God in the Old Testament. And so you're dealing with our ancestors trying to tell us what it was like to be invaded. I mean, let's be honest, that's what we would call it today. We were invaded. And these gods fought each other. They made love. They got drunk. You see that more in the Greek pantheon. They were really like us, but just more so technologically advanced. In the Greek pantheon, they're called Titans. And they're called Anunnaki in the Hebrew, or actually in Sumerian, and they're called the Nephilim. And they have various names, is what I'm trying to say. But they were very, very much like us. And some of them were benevolent. Some of them wanted to help humankind and see where we were going. And Steve knows this stuff, Project Earth, I call it. And some of them wanted to keep us so ignorant that we didn't even know we were naked. And that's still going on today. There's a faction that is probably, benevolent, wants to see how this grand experiment will turn out. And there's some of them who just want to use the planet for its resources.
There's a George Lamsa. Are you familiar with him at all?
Got his Aramaic Bible right here.
Oh, excellent! Yes,
and have a book on New Testament. Yeah, the Aramaic scholar.
Right. He grew up speaking Aramaic.
Yes,
and he wrote books called Gospel Light, Old Testament Light, and so forth. And he demonstrates that a lot of the phrases that are very much fire and brimstone and eternal damnation were actually idiomatic expressions.
Yes.
They were not meant to be taken any more literally than some of the idiomatic expressions we use today. And
exactly.
I think, my God, it just kind of takes that burden of the guilt and of the sinner off your shoulders,
Yeah, and that's even, Susie, that's even without the ET influence, and so in the church, as organizations do, want power and and want the control, and so you have these followers, but yeah, if you read the many different translations in Aramaic of the Lord's Prayer, nothing like what we have. Very mystical in a way. No, I am, us versus them kind of theology there. And that's without the ET influence. So here we have, and I believe that this is why powers that be, leadership around the world, governments, if you will, they're not ready to tackle the religious aspect of this phenomenon. They're not ready for that. And they're having problems dealing, with what they're dealing with. I'm not as critical as I was before. And by that, I mean, I get why the drip, drip, drip of disclosure. I get all that, but it's going to come out. How are you going to tell people that we don't control our airspace? How do you tell people that all this stuff about religion, because it was stuff that we used to control, I get it. How are you going to come out and say, some people lost their lives. We had to keep this under wraps. You can't. If you come out with that, it's political suicide. But you also have to come out with enough so that if it does spill out, you can cover your butt at the same time. But it's got to come out, and it will. But the religious aspect will be, I think, the most difficult. The technological stuff, yeah, you can navigate that. But when you start telling people Yahweh is an extraterrestrial, when you start telling people that Jesus either was a hybrid or hung out with that, for I don't think for everybody, a lot of people will be able to handle that. And I don't think that we can keep using that, society will fall apart. But it's gonna be a game changer. for life as we know it. If people are getting here, what's going to happen with British Petroleum and Exxon, and there's a lot of money into that. If people are with cancer, that kind of thing, these beings, I've had a healing from an extraterrestrial. I mean, they could probably get rid of cancer and all these other things right away, but money's made from all this stuff. When you get people thinking, I'm not a blue Democrat and I'm not a red Republican, I'm not a MAGA person, I'm not a bleeding heart liberal, I'm a citizen of the world, powers that be, that this is, we don't want that. This is working. And if it's not working, it's still working for us. And I believe that's what our ancestors were trying to tell us, that this is what it was like to be occupied, to be invaded. And these are some of the things that we had to deal with. I believe that in my heart. The Bible has beautiful stories. It's got a lot of wisdom. And we need that. But our ancestors we were invaded. The planet was invaded. And that's what we would call it today. That's what we would call it today, an invasion. That's scary stuff for a lot of people. I mean, I wasn't even thinking along these lines when Steve and I were talking. The whole big deal was, here's a minister who's an experiencer and talking about UFOs in the Bible. We're way past that now. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Please.
No, I'm trying to think of, if I hadn't, spent my free time talking to older men about UFOs on the internet like I do, and hadn't had these conversations, if someone just sprang that on me, I'm not sure how I would react if, I hadn't had a background with it already.
Yeah. I mean, listen, and Steve knows this. We haven't talked in 100 years, but I still have post-traumatic stress. It's not as bad. Okay. I the early days, John Mack, Bud Hopkins regressed me, Dr. Gene Mundy. I have a hard time being home by myself when my wife has to be out of town. And I'm talking about seeing people walk through your walls. Okay. That's not supposed to happen. That's not supposed to happen. Looking the way they do, sticking a needle in the back of my head, following, knowing where I am. That is the game changer. But I wouldn't have changed it. I find my experiences in the long run were positive. But Newtonian physics doesn't explain. Your whole reality is changed. And so, yeah, I'm hearing you. Because we were taught that this doesn't happen. This is crazy. We are high on the food chain. This is as high as creation gets. You're not supposed to be able to walk through walls. You're not supposed to be able, the only person who heals you with a touch is Jesus of Nazareth. We're not supposed to have bases in other places. Yeah. And you find out that everything that you were told you were possibly lied to. And how do you deal with that? So I get it. And I don't have this, I'm this lofty attitude. But at times we have to grow up. And so how do we, for instance, I'm a clergy person. When this does come out, and it's coming out now, people are going to be coming to people like you and Steve, and we got to have some freaking answers. We got to have some answers. We've got to have some answers. That's just it. Even saying I don't know, but you got to have an answer, because people are going to need. This is your ministry. Sasquatch, Bigfoot, stretching people's minds. Because, Oliver Wendell Holmes, once the mind is stretched, it can't go back. Guiding them through this. Because who do you think they're going to come to? Our government is going to be trying to cover their butt. And I get it. I'm not going to badmouth them. But no lie lives forever, Nietzsche tells us. And so more transparency, that's why people come to you now. Let's go to the Mothman. Let's go. Everybody else thinks I'm crazy. You and Steve know I'm not. Reverend Carter knows I'm not. How am I going to navigate this? We're going to be needed, grassroots people. And it's important. It's important.
Yeah, absolutely. And kind of like keeping a flexible mind, an open mind, I think we need to do more of.
You cannot not.
Yeah.
You cannot not. I don't think. And I think we can do it. Our ancestors did it. Not perfect. They doctored up the Bible. They changed things around. They made Yahweh the principal God. Yeah, we know that 6th and 7th century. We can talk about that. King Hezekiah and King Josiah. We can talk about that. They wanted everybody to be Yahwehs. They didn't want you worshiping Baal or what's the brother's name? Kohash. I mean, these were other extraterrestrials. Asherah. They didn't want that. I get it. Got it. But they had to navigate it. That we lived in a populated universe. In East India, they had those blue people. They had Krishna. They're portrayed as blue. They talked about the Vimanas, the flying cities. You got the Mohawk and the Cherokee talking about the Palladian and the Star people. We were invaded. And you don't want your government telling you that we probably still are. What are you going to tell them? But that's what happened. And some of these people are still here. And some of these people are working with governments around the world. And we got to put our big boy pants on and our big girl pants, and because it's just the way it is. It's just the way it is. We're not alone. And some of these beings want to, some of them don't want to sing Imagine and Kumbaya, and some do.
Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense when you hear experiencers that have a very positive experience, and then others
I did. I was one of those.
extremely traumatic. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yep.
I was one of those. I mean, I wasn't that far gone with all they did, but when I started writing my books and reading, I was in John Mack's camp more than my brother, Bud Hopkins, but we blended. But I wanted people. It was like if a person of color stole your pocketbook and ran down the street, and now all people of color were thieves. Well, what was happening is that all these beings were bad. And I wanted to say, yes, I still have, back then I didn't think I'd still have post-traumatic stress, but I do. But I just wanted them to see that, but there was some good that come out. And I'm not the only one. There are books written about it now. There's data that shows, but that's what I wanted to say. We can't do that. We do that with each other. And look what we're doing. If I'm, I live in the South, man. And, if someone calls me the N-word, am I going to say all white people do that? You can't do that. The Bible, all these books have strong words about it. That's called judgment. Now, there's righteous judgment. I'm not going to walk down a bad neighborhood in the middle of the night going, oh, I'm not going to judge. And if I get beat up or robbed, I mean, that's stupid. But I'm saying, we do that with each other. People, I know, people that I thought were one way, I get to know them. They're nothing like that. But my fear gets in the way, see? The stereotype gets in the way. And we were doing that with folks. But on the other hand, and I'm not like my brother Greer, maybe he's changed a bit, but Greer is saying, well, they're all want to hold your hand. And I don't know if that's true. It certainly isn't true in our sacred scriptures. It's not true. So we got to walk that balance, because like the Buddhist, life is both and. It's not always either or, but it's both and. But that's the way a grown-up, you have to look at it like that. You know what I mean? I read a lot, obviously, and reading about the Palladians. Do you know there and Billy Meyer and Georgia Dansky? But there's some Palladians that were not the nicest people. But in the UFO community, the blonde, blue-eyed, they're all love and they're beautiful. if you like that standard of beauty. But, they had their things too. They were fighting among themselves, and so we got to get a realistic, usually it's in the middle way. It could be politics, could be whatever you want. I'm not going to get into politics, but we are into politics. But my point is, usually the middle way helps. Extremism doesn't. Extremism does not do it. But we don't, it takes us a long time to learn. Steve, you feeling me? I know you know what I'm talking about. I know you know too, Susie. I'm not always the middle way. There are things you stand for. I'm not talking about, I kind of see their point too. Yeah, the things you stand for. But when you go extreme, look where we are. Look where we are. I'm right, you're wrong. He's right, you're wrong. You're black, I'm white. You're this, you're that. I mean, we got differences. And I think some of these beings are trying to tell us that. You got a planet here you need to take care of. 2, I belong to a very liberal denomination. It's the Unitarian Universalist denomination. But there is people who are very, very dogmatic in their liberalism. We don't talk about that. We talk about the conservatives and how, but wait a minute, what is it? They're dogmatic. Yeah. But I know people who are so liberal that they're dogmatic because they can't see, even in the UFO community, that you're entrenched. You can't see that there's another way to look at this. And voila, it's a mess.
And if you're set in your ways
Like
to the extreme,
God made alcohol.
if you're in, one extreme or the other, you can be divided that way also.
Easily. You can be controlled that way. And for people, I'm sorry, maybe there's some people that didn't like that. I'm just joking, but we're watching. But you got to have a little levity. But yeah. It's not while we're fighting over some of these things, and these are culture things that we have to deal with, but people, while we're fighting each other, people are making money. People advance that we're fighting over these things. It's fine. Let the Romans knew how to do it. Bread and circuses. Keep them entertained. Keep them at each other's throats. But even then, and then their republic became an empire, and then no one had to conquer the Roman Empire. They kind of did it themselves from the decadence. They just did. It was just easier to conquer because they had already lost the moral compass. Pick up a book, somebody. Just read the history. Don't say it was written by this white man or this black man or this white woman. Fine, everybody's got a perspective, but just pick it up. They all come to the same conclusion. We screwed each other. We got so crazy that it was just easy. The Visigoths. Come on.
You mentioned that you came from a kind of a very, I guess.
Am I going off track here?
Oh, no.
Okay, I'm sorry.
A kind of a fundamental or more literalist tradition.
Yeah.
And you mentioned also,
He's bringing us back.
but you mentioned New Thought was an area that I've studied a great deal of.
Yeah.
And can you tell us a little bit about now? Look, ladies and gentlemen, we're not trying to proselytize or change your religious beliefs, but I find this a fascinating area. So, how did this transition occur? How did you find, I guess, a different way?
Well, it came from not having a literalist. Again, this is even before UFO stuff. Not having a literalist interpretation. That if I came from God as love, they call it New Age, but I'm finding this is nothing. There's no such thing as New Age. It's old truths being rediscovered. Okay, it's old truths being rediscovered, And that new thought, I like the idea of this oneness. I like the idea that I wasn't so much a victim, that I had a hand in my life. Yes, there's such a thing as fate. Things do happen. But if I visualize, if I get up here and in my heart what I want to do, the universe will respond. Why? Because I'm part of it. I'm not separate from it. It's not a God way out there separate from me. And I'm a sinner and I'm no good and I don't deserve any good or whatever. The new thought was like, yes, there is something greater than you, call it what you will, that it's not so much what happens to you, but how you respond, not react, but respond to it. That you can meditate, that you can walk in the woods, that you can walk on the beach, that you can create to a degree the life that you want by staying positive, not in denial, but by seeing the good in your life. What does that look like? Having gratitude, being thankful, seeing that force, that God, that whatever you want to call it, higher power, that it's in me and it's in you. And that these teachings were going back from the Bible and beyond. That was, to me, that was water to someone dying of thirst. And it wasn't new. It's there, but you had to read deeper. You had to go to a different level than not just skimming the surface of it. And it also that there were many levels of reality. That's how I got to it. But I realized that was in contrast to what my Baptist peers wanted me to believe. It was a Baptist. Give you an example. I started doing energy healing, Reiki. I don't know what it is now, around the time I had my experiences. A woman today, I taught her first degree Reiki. I've been giving her energy, distant healing, and a tumor went away. I found out today. Tumor went away. The doctor's puzzled by it. She had some gallstones that went away. Now, let me first say this. That's not me. That's the energy that comes through me. But she had to tell me about it. But I was taught to think that the only person who could do that was Jesus, even though Jesus said, "Greater works than I do, you can do."
Exactly.
I'm not a fool. I know it's not Michael. It's not Michael. When I did that, I probably went home and had a beer later after that. It's not this holy life. Yes, I'm a minister, but I'm pretty sure I did. It was a long day with her. But that energy we can all tap into. But in religion, organized or disorganized, most of it tells us that that's just reserved for special folks. Steve Ward can't do that. Susie can't do that. Reverend Carter, you better not be doing it. So I had to move on from that. I respect that. It worked. It still works for some of my friends and stuff, so I don't beat up on it. I remember the Dalai Lama saying that if you have to leave your religion of origin, don't talk bad about it because it works for some people. He was saying you can use Buddhism to make you a better Christian, a better atheist, a better agnostic, a better Muslim, because Buddhism is a philosophy of life. It's not a religion. It's very similar to Stoicism that the Romans were doing. They were coexisting around the same time. Stoicism is just a Western concept, but philosophy of that. But I helped this woman. She will help someone else. And I can't say I did it. I just know that after sending her energy and she learning it, it went away. Who knows? But it didn't hurt her. It helped her. Religion would tell me that that was probably the devil. Exactly. or it was something. Yeah. And so I just had to leave that.
Yeah. I was just reading the other day that there's actually a young man, he might even be a teenager, that they're thinking about they're already talking about making him a saint because he's been doing
Yes.
healings.
Yes. Yeah. And listen, I wasn't raised Catholic. My wife was raised Catholic. She's a UU. And we're not even you. I mean, we're beyond that, but that's the church that gives me the most leeway that I could come and talk about this without them saying the diocese wants to talk to you on Friday. The Catholic Church has done unspeakable. We won't go into it. But they're the only denomination talking about extraterrestrial life. And in 2009, Pope Benedict XVI, the most conservative conservative pope in my lifetime, said that there were extraterrestrials in the Bible. He said, you shouldn't be surprised. Pope Benedict said this in 2009. He also said in 2009 that Yahweh is not the name for God. I thought there'd be more reaction to it because 400 years ago, you and Steve and I would be burned at the stake for what we're talking about now, 400 years ago. So the Catholic Church, Lord knows what secrets they have and whatever, but they're talking about this. Pope Francis has alluded to it. Monsignor Balducci, Corrado Balducci, who's crossed over now, he was one of the Vatican exorcists. He talked about this with Whitley Strieber in his book Confirmation. And even, we've got Vatican folk, what's his name? He's a Jesuit, Funes, Funes. He's at the Vatican Conservatory. They're looking in the skies. So, nobody's all bad and nobody's all good, but at least they are. I was raised Protestant. I don't see many Protestant. Dr. Barry Downing, who's my friend and colleague and mentor. Not many church people are talking about it. And I'm an experiencer and I'm talking about it. And so we need people talking about it in religion. When I go to conferences and I'm talking about, some of the things I do talk about, my experiences, they love it. But when I talk about the spiritual implications, the religious, you can hear a pin drop. Because that's the everyday. I don't know about the combustion systems. I don't know about that. Other brilliant minds are working on that. But people are saying, can I believe in extraterrestrial life and still be a Christian? Can I believe in extraterrestrial life and still be and I'm not crazy. And can I do that? And that's why they need us. They need your podcast. They need me doing whatever it is I'm doing. I don't have a UFO church. I don't talk about this at church. They know I'm doing it. I almost lost my job, but they stood up for me. I almost lost my job. But I don't, that's not what they hired me for. I'm not trying to force them, like Steve said, change your belief system. But I'm just saying this is what happened. And we need to be open to that as we move forward. Otherwise, you'll be left behind. You'll be a dinosaur.
Again, back to the New Thought religions. New Thought it seemed to arise in the late 1800s.
Yep.
It was an amazing time. Spiritualism, the Fox sisters, Theosophy, they all rose up at the same time.
Yes.
We had the
Mary Baker Eddy. Baker Eddy.
The Christian Science, the Fillmores with the Unity School of Christianity, Religious Science, Ernest Holmes. And I grew up in the Christian Science tradition. And so as the years went by, I became fascinated with the whole movement. And if people go back and read about this, you were talking about healing. There was a great healing movement there back then. They were using the same philosophical principles, even though there might be some minor differences between the different philosophies or whatever. But it was just an amazing time. And like you said, this wasn't new. This is using the same principles that were used 2,000 years before.
Yes, Emmett Fox talking about this sermon on the Mount. Mary Baker Eddy, which was Christian Science. And I still have some of their the Raymond Charles Barker, who was in New York, because I used to go to a religious science church, and Unity. Eric Butterworth. They still kept their Christian flavor.
Yes.
Science of mind, religious science deviated from that somewhat, but they were taking the teachings of Jesus and saying that it was more of a mental science. Do you want to be healed? You can use your mind. Your mind is connected to the one mind, which we call God, and
Right.
that you're part of that. And it was revolutionary. It still is.
I went to a Unity church for a while.
Yes, so did I.
With Reverend Jack Boland in Warren, Michigan. Just an amazing guy. He was so far away from a Bible thumper or the fire and brimstone, you know.
Yes.
And another thing you mentioned, you said it's important to get a good translation of the Bible because things get. And one of my favorite phrases to talk about is "sinner repent." When you hear that, you got this heavy guilt thrown on you, you miserable sinner. But repent comes from the Greek words metanoia,
yes,
which means to change your thinking, to raise your thinking.
Preach it, Reverend Ward. Reverend
yes,
Ward. Yes.
And sin is
it means missing
term
the mark. It means
archery.
The mark.
Yeah, exactly.
It means missing the mark. And see, that's why people, Susie, Steve, y'all know, that's why people are leaving religion in droves, because it doesn't, if I think I don't deserve good, how can I ever have it?
Right.
If you teach me I don't deserve it, if you're telling me money's evil and then you send 3 collection plates around, really? The building fund. I mean, how much money is you're giving to the building fund for 20 years? What's going on? You see what I'm saying? And so that's why people are leaving. How and the reason that I do well at my church is because I take those stories without the UFO influence and I try to make it relevant for today. And you empower. Steve is saying this. It's empowering your audience. Someone is saying, I never thought about that. Hey, man, I didn't know that. First thing you do is you get angry because you've been okey-doked. But you start to go look on your own. You got to have the good translation. King James Version, it sounds like everybody's doing Shakespearean theater.
What is a good translation?
Steve talked about.
What about George Lamsa?
I was going to say it's the Aramaic translation of the Bible. The New Jerusalem Bible is a good translation. The American Standard Version, and I'll tell you why. The Bibles that they sell to the average family is different from the Bible that they sell to scholars. And so the translations are not the same. So when you get the New Jerusalem Bible, for instance, it will tell you Elohim is plural, that we're talking about gods, not. It will tell you that. And so it will say where you may see the Lord said, it may be Elohim, where you may see the heavenly council, it may say, well, I call it a federation, but you'll get the heavenly, because you see heavenly council, you think angels singing and harps and whatever, but it will tell you it's a gathering of the Elohim. We would call it a galactic federation today. And so the New Jerusalem Bible is probably one of the best. And it will tell you, this translation and other Bibles will say, so it's more transparent. Any type of interlinear Bible you can get. The King James Version is beautiful, but these are not Shakespearean actors. Do you know what I mean? And so that's what you need. And because those are scholarly Bibles and scholarly translations. And so, but what they say, what the average person buys, the average family is not going to have that. So when they say, when you read that and they're saying the Lord said, and they're saying the Elohim, it's a whole, and you can't unlearn it. Once you see that these are stories, these are not stories about a omniscient, omnipresent, omnipotent deity. These are stories of invasion. These are stories of obedience to keep you paying, praying, and obeying. These are not God stories. And when you read it as God stories, you miss the moral, because you're saying, wait a minute, Yahweh is telling these people to go into Canaan and kill men, women, and children. What kind of God would do that? And then someone says that don't ask that. So you're confused, but in your spirit, you know better. But once you see them as stories of our ancestors telling us that we were invaded, that these beings, they come to us when we need them, and some of them come to us and they're not giving us the good time. Once you look at it that way, then you start saying, okay, this is what these stories are about. Now, when you get to the New Testament, that's a totally different thing. Jesus is talking about his Father, and his Father is not Yahweh. In the Bible, he never praises Yahweh. If anything, he does talk bad about Yahweh. So they're two different entities. But churches won't tell you that. Why? Not because they're all trying to keep a secret, but I know people who know what I'm saying, but they can't say it because they'll lose their tenure. They got family.
Yes. Instead of a jealous God, you have a God that takes care of the sparrows that fall out of the nest.
Exactly.
It's a whole different mindset.
But they can't say it. They can't say Yahweh's crazy and he's an entity, because they'll lose their jobs. They'll lose their tenure. And then you got people who are scholars and they go, okay, I can't go back and do all my research over again, so I'm just going to keep quiet about it. But they know, but they can't come out and say it. And I say that because I don't want to be judgy. I don't want to say that everybody's, under the radar, but every minister has to, he or she has to gauge on their own how far I can go. If I went to my congregation and said this, even though they watch Ancient Aliens, but if I was teaching this every Sunday, I would split my congregation in half. There would be some people who say Michael's onto something, and there would some people say he's a heathen, he's crazy, or whatever. Why would I do that to them? That's their community. You see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Yep. So what do you think about some of these other writings that are not necessarily the Bible, but, kind of religious writings about...
You mean things like the Book of Enoch who were taken out? And I think that we need to be paying attention to them. Well, I have the Josephus, who was Jewish, but he some people call him a traitor, but he was a high-ranking Roman. And he was talking about the fall of Jerusalem. I think it's in book 6, and that there were flying chariots in the sky at the fall of Jerusalem. He's saying this. There's the Book of Enoch. Go and look at the Book of Philip, where Jesus is kissing Mary Magdalene on the mouth, and they ask Jesus, "How come you love her more? Oh, no, how can you do that with her?" And he says, "What you mean is, how do I love her more than you?" I think that these, yes, there's some forgeries, but we have to take these into consideration. The book that we have now, that's after the Council of Nicaea. Politics was involved. These are the books we're going to accept, and these are the books that we won't. So when people say, "Oh, I don't want to get in politics," you're already in it, up to your what. You see, I get what they're saying. Politics is what, but, it is what it is. There's honorable politicians, but you don't hear about them anymore. But my point being is just that we're already in politics, religion and politics. That's what we're talking about. When you read the Bible, Saul, David, Samson, that's religion and politics. Solomon. When you go back and you read the Epic of Gilgamesh about the hybrid, Gilgamesh was a hybrid. One of his parents was a god. He wanted to become a god. When you read the Epic of Gilgamesh, when you read the Enemu Elish, I probably tore that to shreds, about these Mesopotamian texts. And so these scriptures tell us that if you go back and read the Upanishads, right? If you go back and read the Hindu Vedas about the Vimanas, these ships, these flying machines, these are flying machines. Cities, flying cities, sounds like a mothership. Our ancestors were telling us. Again, the Hopi, the Cherokee, the Mohawk, the Star people, they taught us how to begin civilization, how to plant, what plants were good to eat, what plants were poisonous. Astronomy, astrology. All our history is telling us about beings who came down from the sky, and some of them were helpful and jump-started civilization, and some of them were not so helpful. It's whether you're in Africa, whether you're in the Nordic countries, whether you're in India, whether you're Native American, Aboriginal Australians, all these stories are about these beings who come down. Plato talks about it. Plato talks about every 5,000. I've been going back and reading Timaeus and Phaedo and Cremius. Every 5,000 years, there's a cataclysm. Because he's talking about Atlantis as well. But he's talking about every 5,000 years. There's some cataclysm, whether it's an asteroid, whether it's a pole shift, he doesn't say. But he says, he talks about reincarnation. Plato believed in the gods, who we would call ET, and he believed in a God. He talked about what we would call quantum physics. He talked about a fractalized universe. He was talking about this 2,500 years before Jesus. And he talks about every 5,000 years or so, there's a cataclysm. Maybe it's a pole shift. Maybe it's an asteroid hitting us. And that humanity goes back to ground zero. And the survivors are visited by the gods, and they jumpstart. Go back and read it. When we talked about Plato, when I was in school, they just gave you a little handout. They didn't go back into all this. They gave you the handout they wanted you to read. And so we may be at that juncture now where we could have a pole shift. Edgar Cayce talked about that. We know a big rock will hit us. An asteroid may hit us. We know that what we're doing to the atmosphere because of our technology and not having the wisdom. So none of this stuff is new. It's like a cycle. It's happened before. Every culture has a flood story. Plato talks about Atlantis. He learned from Atlantis from who? From Solon, who was a Babylonian Greek priest. Where did he get it from? He got it from Egypt, an Egyptian high priest who talked about Atlantis. And of course, there was Lemuria before that. Why would these people lie about that? And these were advanced civilizations with using crystals and energy and had flying machines. Why would our ancestors lie about this? And here we are. This is new. That's why I say there's no new thought. There's no new age. This has been going on. Did you see yesterday, or it was the day before, that they're finding out that the Egyptians operated on cancer? Where did they get that sophistication from? National Geographic. It's been in social media the past 2 days. There's a skull with a hole in it. And now, how could they do that? Operating surgery on cancer patients? Where did they learn that? We think we're new. We think we're innovative. We're not. People were doing this before we were here, before we became so clever. Maybe we're too clever for ourselves now.
Yep. So I've never heard you speak on this specifically, but I'm sure you're aware of it. OASB. Are you familiar with that book? John Ballou, Newbrow?
One of
No.
the channeled documents from the 1800s. Supposedly he was in contact with highly evolved angelic beings.
Okay.
And he channeled this on a typewriter, a little bit like, I guess you could say,
writing.
A Course in Miracles.
Like Seth, like Michael.
Yes, but this goes back a ways.
Yeah. I will say this. I don't know what to say about it. I will say this. When I was younger, I was very much into channeled stuff. I just named Seth Barth, Course in Miracles, the Michael teachings, and I believe that people contact a greater reality. That's all really I can say. I know that a lot of stuff gets filtered because you have to go through the personality of the channel. So if you're asking me, do I believe that there's validity to some channel material, I will say unequivocally yes. But I also know I'm cautious now, more nowadays, so that's the only way I can answer that. I'm sure that there, obviously this person was channeling truths and stuff centuries ago that, profound, maybe ahead of his time. I believe that can happen. But I also am I'm not skeptical, but I'm more vigilant about what I accept.
Well, what's interesting about that is that if you look at George Hunt Williamson, that supposedly was channeling the Space Brothers, George Van Tassel.
Yes.
More recently, The Law of One, the raw materials.
I have that book, yeah.
Raw. And anyway, sometimes you'll find that people that didn't know each other and didn't really have any contact, they would be channeling some of the same, in quotes, entities, some of the same names, and also get some of the same messages. Like
information, yes.
The Orion group were the bad guys. The Palladians were the good guys.
Yes.
And Maldek was the planet that became the asteroid belt. So I just, again, I'm very skeptical about some of that stuff may just be coming out of the collective unconscious. It might just be nonsense, but it's fascinating.
That's why I was wondering, because he talks a lot about extraterrestrials coming here to mate with humans to advance the civilization is one of the themes in his writing.
And I'm sure there's true. Well, we know you look at the Book of Enoch. So I haven't read it. I'm sure from you guys, I can intuit that it's some information that's pertinent and relevant. And at the same time, whereas before I wasn't as discerning, I'm a little more now.
Yeah. So Newbrow was one of my ancestors, distantly.
Oh,
that's why it's kind of personal to me.
So Susie right now is confessing about her ancestors.
Yes, I love it.
Well, John Keel, that wrote the Mothman Prophecies and studied the Mothman, he was in contact with several individuals that he called silent contactees because they firmly believed they were in contact with these other intelligences. And they didn't care if anybody believed them or not. They would get these predictions, some would come true. And but later on, Keel came to believe that a lot of the stuff was just sort of the trickster or nonsense. It wasn't really terribly valid. But it's something that it's again, that whole area I find fascinating, and I think people should approach with caution.
Exactly, and at the same time with an open mind.
Yes,
especially if you're hearing the same material, over and over. Where there's fire, there's smoke. Where there's smoke, there's fire.
Right.
I agree.
Yep, I'm always asking people that have contact with anything non-human, like, how do you know? How do you trust something? And everyone just says, you just know. Just like when you meet someone new, you kind of can get a sense of, not all the time, but is this my people, or is this person, maybe not to be trusted? You have a gut feeling.
And sometimes you get God. I mean, like my sister, my half sister, whom I love very dearly, she is evangelical Christian. She does not like me, or she will not deal with UFO entities or what have you. And when I say to her, she'll say, Michael, how do you know they're not demons? How do you know? And I'll say, look at the work I'm doing in the world. Does it seem evil to you? Does it seem like I'm doing something wrong to you? And she'll say, well, Michael, like she doesn't know this, but it's like the Shakespearean thing in Hamlet, the devil hath power to assume a pleasing shape. So you can't win with that. but I think in the long run, like I told you, like I have, this is one of the beings who came to see me back in 1989. Now he had on a suit. I'm using the pronoun he, that looked like this. It was like a jumpsuit. I had the artist who made this put a robe on. But okay, so they were coming to visit me for a while. And one time they paralyzed me. Well, they would paralyze me. And they stuck a needle in the back of my head here, with that little hollow where your neck, the brainstem is. And it was excruciating. And I told a friend of mine about it who was an astrologer, and she was one of the few people I could talk to about it. And she said, Michael, you got to set some boundaries with these people. They're probably around you. You may not see them. So I did. And the next time they came, they paralyzed me, the whole thing. They stuck a needle in the top of my crown, but it was so gentle. It's like when someone takes blood and you don't even feel the needle going in. I got a point here. So I thought that they heard me. I thought that because I would talk to them, even though I couldn't see them. I remember my first wife came in the house one day. She said, I didn't know what to think. She was there when they came the first time. She said, I saw you in a pair of shorts yelling up at the ceiling. I thought you had lost your mind. My point being, I thought they had heard me because the next time they came, it did not hurt. But the other thing is this. Outside of those two incidences, my life got better. I was more authentic. I felt smarter. I had the physiological changes. My hair and nails grew faster. I got by on less sleep. I had so much energy. But as time went on, psychic ability, intuitive stuff was more intense. But my heart opened. That's the best way I could explain it. I felt more intelligent. Now, I'm not saying this happens with everybody, because some people have had sperm and ovum taken, anal probe. I'm not saying that this is universal. I'm just saying for me. And what their visits did for me was that I had to look at fear. I had to say to myself, yes, they're bizarre looking. This person came to see me, this praying mantis, this reptilian came. I'm going over a course of time. This Palladian person came and gave me and healed a blood clot that I had. But I had to say over time, these beings did not hurt me. I had fear because they could just pop up. I could go to bed tonight and I could get up to go to the bathroom and one of them could be there. That shakes you up. But as far as that and the bizarreness of it, my life got better. And so it made me look at other places where I let fear hold me back. I'm not saying I shouldn't have been afraid of them. Look at them. Okay, these people look bizarre. But as they came regularly, my fear lessened, didn't go away, but fear is the enemy in the sense of I could let fear keep me from being present into what was happening. Like I can use it now, fear, even without ET influence. Fear of new, fear of the new, fear of the different, and I could rationalize that fear away. And so it's always peeling the onion. Because this, to me, this is not about tech. It's about a change in consciousness. Even without ET, I got a planet that I'm screwing over. I got people that I'm screwing over. I have to change my mind about it in order to interact. Like Einstein said, you can't, solve today's problems with yesterday's thinking. So I have to have a change of consciousness, have to have a change of heart. I think that this is one of the message, not the only message, of these visitations.
So what you're saying is, by their fruits ye shall know them.
Yes. Yeah. 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 And that doesn't mean you don't get deceived, because people can deceive you. But you got to keep an open heart. And sometimes you're going to get God. But you got to keep saying yes to life. Otherwise, you shut down. Well, see, they burned me last time. I'll never get married again. I'll never open my heart to anybody else again. I'll never trust that white person again. I'll never trust this black. I'll never trust. And you shut down. And the thing about life is keeping your heart open. Keeping your heart open. At least that works for me. Let me be clear. That works for me.
Can we just divert from this just a little bit temporarily? Sort of an intermission. I'd love to know what it's like to go through the process of being on Ancient Aliens and the filming. I'm sure there's people out there that are saying, "Ask Michael about Ancient Aliens." So I thought I would.
Okay, I'll tell you. It's wonderful. Okay, so I'll go back to the first time, what I can remember. I got the call. At that time, they were always shooting in LA. Sometimes they shoot in New York. Last time they shot in Boston. Boston. So you go. They fly you out. They fly you out. I was going out to LA. And at that time, someone would pick you up, but you get to your hotel in LA. I mean, I love LA. So, and they take care of your food. They take care of your hotel. You just got to show them your receipts, your parking, the whole bit. And then you get on the set. And you have your little dressing rooms and what have you. The grueling part is this. They give you a list of questions, like a lot of questions. And if you're doing more than one episode, yeah, okay. And you gotta, they'll walk you through. We're going to talk about this today, Michael. We're going to talk about the teachers, and maybe it's about antiquity, whether it's Plato, whether it's up till the very day. You got to go and research that, and you got to have those answers for it. And they do say, if there's something that you don't feel comfortable with, just say so and we'll move on. But the human ego gets, I want to know about all of it. I don't want to say no, because will they not hire me again or whatever? So you want to do a good job. And so, but it's very relaxed. And so, like for those two shows, The Teaching and The Chosen, one show gave me 10 or 12 questions I had to know the answers to, and one was like 20, 25. And so, you just study them, but it's an area of your expertise. It wasn't like, oh my God, this is out of the blue. So you get there and you get on the set. When I was there before, Giorgio was there a lot, but not so much anymore. Nick Redfern, Eric would be there. They'd be there and they talk, they're friendly, you talk. And so you're on the set and it usually takes about 3-4 hours, about 3.5 hours. And you're doing a lot of stuff, but they cut it down by the time you're on the show. Things are edited out and whatever, we talked about with Bill Shatner. And it's just a very professional, calm working atmosphere. There's food around. If you need food, they give you some water. You get your little makeup on, and they go over it. They'll say, which ones do you want to do first? And you just say, and you'll do it. And they tell you, repeat the question. Don't just answer the question. Like someone will say, what's it like working on the show? Yeah, let me tell you what it's like working on the show. You repeat the question. And they'll go back and they may say, can you elaborate on that a little more? Or sometimes the questions you get by answering one, you've answered the other two. So that's always nice. So you might elaborate on that. At the end of the day, one time I was there and they said, "You got any friends in New York?" I said, "Yeah, I used to live here." "Well, because if you go late, why don't you stay? You want to stay over a night?" And I say, "Yeah, and stay over. We'll get you out the next day." That kind of stuff. And you know, they will get back to you about, they used to not do that, but they will get back to you about when the dates are. Or they'll call you, like, "I know this is coming up, hasn't come up yet." So someone will call me and say that the episodes you shot will be airing, blah, 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 blah. And, you know, you just, like, they give you a ride to the airport. Again, you know, they pay for your meals and everything, and you just give them a receipt. And they do that each time. Sometimes it'll be New York. Sometimes it'll be LA. I was just in Boston for the second time. And it's just amazing because people watch the show. My book sales go up. So people are watching the show, and you will get emails and people will ask you questions about that. So they've been good to me. And it has definitely got me the visibility that I have now. And I do other shows, you know, because they with the History Channel. I did something with Larry Fishburne on America's Greatest, you know, mysteries, that kind of stuff. So it kind of snowballs. And I'm anxious to see what this is going to look like in this new show on the Discovery Channel. But that's a day on Ancient Aliens. A lot of times they're not there now, so you don't see them. But at the beginning, you know, you'd have lunch with them and talk, but they stagger you. So I'll do my shooting, and then maybe Giorgio, they've already been there. So
Right.
then when I'm leaving, the next, maybe Kathleen Martin's coming on. That we just, matter of fact, we bumped into each other in Boston. When I was leaving, she was coming in to do her episode. So that's what it's like working on the show. They're very professional. They're very kind. They're very, you know, it's not a lot of ego.
Well, that's good.
Yeah.
You know, I think I confessed this to you before, but originally I was an Ancient Alien snob. I would not watch it because the Ancient Alien idea had such a bad reputation back a couple decades ago. But I have grown to love the show. I don't obviously agree with everything that's said, but nobody does.
Of course.
But now you've been to some of the big events, the Ancient Alien events.
I haven't. No, I haven't, Stephen. To be honest with you, I don't watch the show. And part of that's from being an actor. I mean, I did it first, don't get me wrong. But, you know, my schedule's so busy, sometimes it's on. Now I could stream it and watch it. But I watched it all the time. And then my schedule got busy. But and probably it's like when I was an actor, you know, you kind of just do the gig, get paid, and it's on. But I think with you, yes, you don't agree with everything. But again, I think what the show has done, it's obviously touched people. I mean, they're in their 18th, 20th season. But it has stretched people's minds, and it's got them to think outside the boxes around religion, around archaeology, around history, our human origins. And so that's why it's so popular.
I mean, you can be as skeptical as you want, but how the hell did they move those stones? You know,
exactly. And you know, no one's been able to answer that. But with the ancient alien hypothesis, it makes sense. It makes sense.
Now, I think now you can correct me if I'm wrong. I think you confessed to me that you have shared an adult beverage or two with Eric Von Daniken. Is that correct?
Ooh, yes.
Okay, you can deny it if you want. That's all right.
No. And he is a partier. I was at the Edgar Casey. That was when I first started out. I was starting to get a little name for myself, and they called me in. And Giorgio was there. I think I still have pictures from that. Giorgio was there. I was there. Eric was there. There were a couple other speakers there. And so I went down to the hotel and downstairs to have a beverage, and Eric was there. And I said, "I know you." And he says, "I know you." And we were putting away some alcohol, and I had to leave. I may have had 3 or 4 glasses of wine. I was done. And so I had to go upstairs to my room and take a nap. When I came back down, Eric was still there, still drinking. And then we all got together with some of the people in the audience. We went outside and sat on the beach, Virginia Beach. He was still drinking. See, I started drinking again, but I had taken a nap. It was just wine, good wine. And Eric was a hoot, and he put it all away. And he's fun. He's down to earth. He's passionate. And, we stand on the shoulders. We stand on his shoulders, those of us who are in ancient astronaut history. He was like that. And the other person for me, because he was a clergy person, not an experiencer, was Dr. Barry Downing, a retired Presbyterian minister, wrote a book called The Bible and Flying Saucers back in 1968. And we became friends. I met him once. And he's retired now. He's older now. His wife has passed away and that kind of thing. But we have a different theology, because Barry is very much into his Presbyterian theology. As a matter of fact, he said, "You know what, Michael, your problem is you want your God to be warm and fuzzy. We don't need that." And I was like, "But warm and fuzzy, I mean, Yahweh's committed genocide. I mean, how can you?" But those two because they were on a religious kick, and that's what I know best.
Well, Eric was really savaged back in the old days. I mean, he made some mistakes, and I remember reading the more recent edition of Chariots of the Gods, big long introduction where he said, "Yeah, it was the exuberance of youth, and I made some mistakes here and corrected them." And I don't agree with everything Eric says either, but I have to tell you, I love that guy. He is a survivor against all the naysayers and all the criticism. How many millions of books has this guy sold?
Yes.
Still out there. And I have to tell you, I love the way he says extraterrestrials.
I hear you. Well, listen, we're finding out some of the flaws in Sitchin's work.
Yeah.
But like Mike Tyson said, and I don't quote Mike Tyson often, he said, "You don't throw away a Rolls Royce because you got a scratch on it." And they were the ones who opened us up to this.
Yeah.
And so there's an old saying: if you want new material, go read an old book. And I must tell you, occasionally I go back over here and I pick up a Von Daniken book. I pick up a few of Sitchin's books. You can't go wrong, because there are a lot of people who use Sitchin's work but don't give him credit for it. I find that a lot, and so I'm like, hey, okay, you've advanced, you've evolved, but go back to this is the guy who opened the way up for you, and so I think it's wonderful. I think if they were here now, they'd be vindicated. And so it's just a wonderful time.
Yep. Speaking of books, you have quite a few out there.
I have a few books. Yes, I have my latest book which is of non-extraterrestrial ideas. It's called Enlightenment. It's a book of sermons on philosophy, on social justice, race, on religion. And the book before that, which I really like, is Initiation. It's kind of a handbook for experiencers, for people who are experiencers, for people who know an experiencer, there's an experiencer in their family, or for people who may think they are experiencers and are not quite sure. But the biggest seller, though, and people obviously have expanded on this, but is Alien Scriptures. That's the people buy that book the most out of all. And then I have a book on prayer and healing called The Metaphysics of, I have it here, Spiritual Healing and the Power of Affirmative Prayer. I wrote a book on it's a meditation manual with comments and lessons from atheists from it's called God Consciousness. I should have put God in quotes. But it's about it's a meditation manual, a lesson for each day. At that time, I didn't want to just be known as the UFO minister. So I figured I'd rebel. And so I wrote those 2 books, but I'm still known as the UFO minister, but I'm more comfortable with it now. Yeah.
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 I enjoyed Initiation. We
Thank
talked
you.
about that
Thank you,
before.
Steve. That's one of my favorites. Yeah. Maybe I'll revise it and add some stuff to it, but it's a basic kind of handbook for folks because it's hard to navigate. And if you don't have anybody to talk to about this, and many people don't, and there's data that shows that a lot of couples break up, a lot of marriages break up if one person's having this experience and the other person can't get to it, or it's hard to, because you're growing and evolving. So I wanted to put that out there. But I find that, again, I do a lot of counseling with people who are experiencers and people who aren't. It helps to be an experiencer, but being non-judgmental, just listening, not trying to fix, and let people tell their story. It's the gift that keeps on giving. And what you guys are doing as well. It's a ministry. You guys, you don't have to look at it that way. It's a ministry. You're empowering people, giving them information. It's healing.
And early on in the book, you make a distinction between contactees, abductees, and experiencers.
Yeah, and people self-identify as such. I do not think I was abducted in the sense. Now, when I was regressed, yes, I didn't know it at the time. I was taken out of my room, and there are some people who have been abducted. And Bud, worked with a lot of those people. Contactees was also the old 1950s.
Oh, sure.
Kind of word, yeah.
I love those stories, even though they might be a little fanciful. I love to go back to those
and read a
days of yesteryear. And have you ever read The Flying Saucer Pilgrimage by the Bryants?
No.
It was written in the 60s, I think, maybe 50s. They had a flying saucer group in Detroit, and they heard about this guy, George Adamski. So they started flying people in from all over, right? People like Adamski, Edward Ruppelt, and so forth. And,
oh my goodness!
But then they made a pilgrimage across the U.S. and they met all these different contactees. And again, I don't care if you think it's charlatanism or folklore or whatever. It is a fascinating book, The Flying Saucer Pilgrimage.
I may see if I can get that on
probably you have to be careful. Third-party sellers, they might jack the price up a little bit. But
of course they will.
Worth the read,
yeah. I have a friend who's an Adamski scholar. He's in Amsterdam. He just dedicated. He's an academic. His name is Gerard Austin.
Yes, I've got some of his books. Right.
Yeah, me too. He's a good friend of mine. Matter of fact, my wife and I are going to go see him in Amsterdam in August. But
that'll be fun.
Yeah, because I've never been. But yeah, I think those folks open the door. I really do. We all stand on the shoulders of other people, and even some of Billy Meyer. I think Billy started out on the good foot, and just it's hard. You're getting all this fame and everything, but I think he started out telling the truth about some things. Yeah, I do. I do believe in the beginning. But I will say that they are vindicated in a lot of ways. We talk about the Tic Tac videos and stuff like that, but what about the Foo Fighters back during World War II? Everything old is new again, and just trying to, what are these beings? What are these craft? What's going on? And I think that we can learn a lot. We don't have to live in the past, but we can learn a lot by going back and looking at some of the things these people were talking about, and that kind of thing. And it can help us as we move into the future.
The development, the manifestations of these lights and objects over the decades have changed somewhat. But even though they've changed, we still get some of the old stuff,
Exactly.
And I'm thinking that when you talked about the contactees, Orfeo Angelucci, who had some pretty fanciful claims, he went into a fugue or a trance for a week. They thought he was going to die. And when he came out of it, he was talking about these wonderful visits with the Space Brothers, very similar to and Jeffreys of the 1600s who would go into a trance and have these wonderful experiences with the little people, with the elementals, but she didn't leave her bedroom. So there's something, and then you've got that parallel there between elements of folklore and some modern day UFOs.
Yes, exactly. What was the other one I bought, but I haven't? The Commonwealth, the Secret Commonwealth.
Oh yes, right.
Yes, yeah, about that Presbyterian, was he a Presbyterian or Episcopalian minister?
Yes, I can't think of his name. But then there's also
talking about the little people.
Fairy Faith in Celtic Countries by
yes.
He was a theosophist, Edward Wentz, and he was.
Let me tell you, and I mean, they're saying the same thing that's going on now.
Yes, exactly.
And, you know, so that's, I think we have to do the research, but be reminded that, you know, this is not new, that this has been going on. Again, the Bible, the Upanishads, the Mesopotamian texts, the Sumerian texts are telling us, our ancestors are telling us, we were invaded, that these beings were here, that we were caught in a crossfire, and this is how we dealt with it. And here we are. And now how are we going to deal with it is the question.
Like you said, if you want to learn something new, pick up an old book.
Yeah, you want new info, go to an old book.
I think I can say that Susie and I have a hell of a lot of old books, and I'm sure you do too.
Yeah, I do. And I will go back and refer to them. This has been beautiful, gang.
It has been. And if anyone wants or needs to reach out to you, what is the best way for them to do that?
Michael JS Carter, J as in Jerry, S as in Sam, Carter at gmail.com. I have a fan page, a Facebook page, Reverend Michael J. Carter. My website is michaeljscarter.com. And if they write me, I will respond.
Well, Susie, thank you for inviting me on the show. And Michael,
yes,
it's always a pleasure to talk to you.
Always a pleasure, guys. I hope you enjoy your summer. Susie, you guys, Steve, if you need me, call me. We could do it again.
That we definitely will.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
yes.
Yeah, we could get more into the Bible, and I could give you some verses and stuff like that, Old and New Testament, and talk about Jesus and his relationship with Yahweh or lack of one, that kind of thing.
And perhaps we should all write the Ancient Aliens people and say, we need more Michael.
More, yep.
You know what? I would love it if you did that.
Very good.
I would love it. I think they would too.
Yep,
so
absolutely.
Yeah, please do that. And let's be in touch and enjoy the rest of this evening. And I'm wishing you all many blessings and a gentle peace.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.